And it is on this day, January 9th, 2023, that it has been 1 year since I finished reading the Power Mage trilogy by Brian McClellan. And oh my god, I've been waiting a whole year for this. I cannot even begin. I have been waiting and waiting and waiting to reread the series because I've been wanting to do this video forever, and this video is actually the reason why I've wanted to start doing the anniversary reviews, because I fucking love this series and I really wanted to reread it, and this gives me a reason to reread it, but then I had to wait to reread it. So this gives you a hint on how I feel about this series, but in this video, we'll have non-spoilers and spoilers to dive into this series and what I think about it, if it's worth reading, which it is, if it's good for you. Promise of Blood, this is the first book of the Powder Mage trilogy. It's pretty decently sized, all of these books. They're not big, they're probably not terrible in word count, but they're still pretty decently sized, I would say. So here's the first book, and then while I'm talking, we'll go on to the second book, The Crimson Campaign. Okay, so this is one of the ones that I read 500 pages of today. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. I read 500 pages of this book today. Because it's fucking fantastic. So, fantastic book. Okay, and then we have the last book, which I think has an absolutely gorgeous cover, so I'm gonna bring it closer in a minute, but The Autumn Republic. This is the last book of the trilogy, and I love this cover. You can see the flag of the Adsea, and just Thomas in all of his glory. Thomas, 100%, he earned his place on this cover, and this, I adore this cover, because especially after reading the series, like, this is precious to me. Just this image of him, it's so precious to me. So, oh, but it's just gorgeous. It's the colors, it's the cannon, it's the fact that he's holding the flag in his full uniform, like, gorgeous cover. This cover made me excited for the book before I even picked up the series, because it's just one of those covers that attracts my eye as a reader. And man, was it worth it. I'm going to try to calm down the nerding out a little bit, but I have spent the last hour kind of nerding out, so bear with me. As I alluded to while I was showing those, I have pretty much reread 2 of these 3 books. I only started the 3rd. I wasn't able to finish rereading the 3rd. However, I feel very confident in my ability to comment on this series, and I will finish rereading this 3rd book, because I'd be crazy not to, because it is a fantastic book. But I think I can confidently, very confidently comment on my opinion of these books 1 year later after I finish them on January 9th in 2022. There's also going to be an additional comment towards the end after spoilers, but we'll get to that when we get there. Starting off with non-spoilers. Hold on, let me hold the books one more time, because I forgot to stay still. There we go. Okay, hold the books one more time. Non-spoilers. For people who have not read this series, for all the ranting I just did, ignore all of that. If you have not read the series, here's your non-spoilers point of view of people who have not read this. Powder Mage trilogy. One of the first things that I would bring attention to is the fact that it's called Powder Mage. Powder Mage trilogy is known for having its magic. Its magic system is kind of, I'm going to say unique. Pretty much all magic systems are unique in their own way. But this magic system, it's interesting how it's broken apart. All the different magic systems, like all the different types of magic in this magic system, can be connected or disconnected. Like, they don't necessarily relate to each other, and the powers are all very different because of the nature of how these magics came around. So this kind of brings in like a little hint of world building. We'll talk about more about that later, but really, powder mages are one of the many types of magic in this world. They're not the only one, but they are the main one because they're the point of view we are following. They're the one we see the most and hear the most about. And I love them. They are fantastic. They're well written. If you love musket era stuff, you will love powder mages. I can pretty accurately say that. I loved musket era stuff, so give a guy with a musket, give him some magic that has to do with it, I'm all in. So, Powder Mage. Aside from the powder mage, though, we have some other types of magic. Privilege, which are more of your like open, flowy kind of magic, and very badass and creepy and terrifying. And then Knacked. The Knacked is such like a simple magic system, but it adds so much variance and unknown and stuff like that, and it allows you to get a perspective unlike any other character along the way. So Knack, also awesome. Be Denzine. I need to watch some videos of the author talking about his book so I can actually know how to say his stuff. But other type of magic, there's all kinds, and it just keeps elaborating and elaborating, and it's very sophisticated and awesome and very hooking, and it's called the Powder Mage Trilogy for a reason, and it earned that title, and the magic is very, very interesting and very much has to do with everything. Okay, moving on from the magic, we got plots, different types of plots. I mentioned how we have different magic with different characters. We also have different plots with different characters. This is a military series. You can see Thomas on the cover in his military uniform with the musket. However, while there are military plots, not everything's a military plot. You got political plots, you have mystery plots, because you're following an inspector through the series. You have a bunch of world-building plots that you kind of just go around and world build in a good way. It's very, very interesting. You have those soldier plot lines, but again, you also have like tactics, like from like an overhead point of view. You have religious plot lines. Like you can go. There's a lot of different ways this book goes, and it does so much world building in just 3 books. We learn so much about this world through all these different plot lines, and they combine together beautifully, in my opinion. So there's a lot of different aspects in this, and in my old reviews I talked about the mystery plots and how I didn't know how I felt about them at first. I can tell you right now, I love it. In a reread, it is fantastic, because you see how it all hooks together. When I talked about that in my book 2 review and my book 1 review, I hadn't read book 3 yet, so now that I can look back at it like all together, I think it's well balanced and amazing. And that leads into my next point, the balance, the pacing the author has in the series. Again, I could not have commented on this the first time I read it, but I can tell you now, after rereading most of the series, the pacing is fantastic, especially with the military plots and like the speedy stuff and fighting and all these different magic systems. You also have the mystery plot. You have a bunch of like traveling periods, which matter, and some in-between interactions behind the soldier lines that you also need to talk about and exhibit and show, and the author does at a great pace that actually keeps you still intrigued. And do I talk about the spoilers? I'll talk about the spoilers. It's fine. But in my reread, I obviously read most of this book in a single day, and these aren't small books. And if I remember correctly, I read The Autumn Republic in a few days the first time. Like, I think my reviews were like days apart. So I read this book fast, my first read, and let me tell you, I'm going to read it fast my second read. So the pacing keeps you hooked. It is very addicting. I feel like I was in a constant sprint when I was rereading Crimson Campaign. Oh, and it's very satisfying, because it's good, and it has the breaks where it needs it. It has the humor where it needs it, but it still keeps up that pace through the book. It keeps bringing up the new surprises, particularly the mystery plots, and it just keeps going, and I think it's amazingly well done. Alright, next thing, I have to comment about badass fight sequences. There's some fight sequences where I was a little worried, and I kind of wanted to complain about them in my first read. There's sometimes where you don't know enough about the magic yet to be able to make sense of the fight, and it feels like a lot to take in. However, later on, when you recognize that magic and can understand it, and have known these characters for a while, you can go very, very attached to the fight scenes. And there are some moments that are just... I don't know how to describe the feeling. It feels like my heart goes hollow. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but on a reread where I know what happens in the fights, like, I know where it's going, I get this feeling of my heart, like, going hollow in, like, anticipation. And it's just so good. And sometimes it gets a good laugh out of me. Like, a certain character will, like, do something, and I'll just be like, oh, like, laughing in that oh my god, holy hell, he just did that kind of way. So good. It's so intense. Even on a reread, it is intense. So the fights are very heavy. You have been warned. And there is gore. You have been warned. So good. Particularly in books 2 and 3. But so good. It's also very... I would like to say and note here that the fight sequences, the author did his research on this era, as one should, and made sure to incorporate a lot of the different aspects of the era. He has the language, he has like the different materials and tools, a lot of the mentality of how these people would fight like comes into the fight. So I really also value that, and how even beyond the soldiers, you have the bodyguards, you have the I guess agents, spies, so, like all these different kind of people who brawl. Like you have boxers and like all these different kinds of fighting people, and you can like very much tell how their different types of fighting are, and that the author looked into each of their types of fighting to make sure he got them right. So I also really respect that in terms of the fighting. Okay, one of my biggest points in the non-spoilers: lovable characters. I said in one of my reviews, I believe it was my Alden Republic review, that this is the series that has the most, in number, lovable characters that I've had in a series, and that is still true. I have loved all the main characters in this series pretty much. Like, every main character, I love them. And I can say that about other series, but this series has more main characters, numerically. So this series kind of wins, and I love them so much. I grew so attached to them. In the first book, I really was worried I wouldn't grow attached to some of them. Oh man, though. Oh man. By book 2, I was like hooked to a lot of the people. In book 3, I was like completely dead on hooked on the characters. And when I finished the series, I missed the characters so much. And that is part of why I've been wanting to do this reread for several, like 8+ months now. I've been waiting to do this reread because I miss these people. I miss these characters. I love them so much. And they're flawed. They are flawed people. 100%. They have their flaws. They have their moments you hate them. But oh my god, it makes me love them more. It's so well done. I love them. I love them so much. Fantastic job with the characters. I can't let it go. They're just so fantastic. I'm going to shout out certain characters in spoilers, but lovable characters. I think the series alone could be worth it for the characters. In my opinion, I do have a very particular way where I grow very attached to characters in a way that other people don't, but I would have read this series just for the characters, even without all the military fantasy and magic and literally world building and everything else the series has. Okay, we have one last point for non-spoilers, and we move on. I think I said that one right. Yeah, we have one last point for non-spoilers, and then we'll move on to spoilers. We're trying to keep pace here. It's very hooking. The first book, it picks off like right off the bat, and you are in the plot. Like, you are going off, you're kicking off. Now, in the second book, it's a little bit slower in the beginning, and then you're hooked for the rest of it. It's the kind of vibe of that book. Third book, I'm not even going to elaborate on this one, but again, it has its hooking moments, and you're pretty much doing sprints as a reader, which I think is a good thing, because sometimes you will find that spot where you need to pause, and I need to like that spot where I need to pause, and then you'll be in like the really good sprint, like you'll be very satisfied, and then you're in that like pause region again. It's very noticeable, and it's hooking for the sections you need to be hooked, and you can feel it coming. You can like feel like all the like everything building on each other, building on each other, building on each other for like all the chapters in a row, and then there'll be a break, and the break in a way is structured in such a spot that it will build on even though it's a break. Fantastic. Again, it's just a very readable series. You can read it pretty fast if you let yourself get hooked. You have to let yourself get hooked, but if you like get into one of those sections, like carry on, like let it go, and it's just very readable. It flows. That's what I want to say. It flows fantastically, and again, it's one of my favorite ways something has been written. The way all the like characters flow into each other. And one last comment about that, the different point of views flow into each other really well too. You think that some point of views like don't matter or like don't contribute to another point of view, and then we'll find a way for them to matter to each other. And pretty much throughout the entire series, but particularly books 2 and 3, the author is consistently like hinting to another perspective with the other perspectives, and it just builds on that dramatic irony where you know something that the characters don't. It builds on so much, and it's just so fantastic how the author feeds you information in the tidbits that he needs to feed it to you. Fantastic. I love this series. I know I'm praising the author a lot, but seriously, I do really, really love this series. It is one of my favorites. It's still on my favorites list. I think I took Crimson Campaign off my favorite books list. I think I'm going to add it back on now, because it really is one of my favorites. 100%. I love this series so much. I think it's worth reading. If you have not read it, at the very least, add it to your to-be-read list. Try the first book. Just know that the second book and the third book are fantastic. The first one would be a little slow. I think I read the second book months and months after I read the first book. I did that. Just eventually try book 2 and please, that is it. That is all. Spoilers. Going into spoilers because I am ranting. Okay. This is your time to leave. Ooh. Okay. Breathe. Breathe. Okay. In spoilers, we're mostly going to be talking about key moments I loved. A lot of these key moments will be in book 2 because I started taking these notes in book 2. Not surprised. But book 2 also had a lot of the moments I actually remembered the best, other than the ending and the utter chaos that comes in book 3. And one random scene that I remember somehow, but we're not going to get into that one. Scenes I love. I don't know, I didn't order these, so we're going to be hopping around a bit here, but the first one I wrote down was Thomas versus Bayon. Like, Bayon je Ipil, however you say it, the youngest commander, the youngest son of the King of Kez, against our dear old Field Marshal Thomas, that I adore with my soul, and I love him so much. Look at him in all of his glory. He looks so badass. He is so badass. He's one of the most badass characters I have ever read, period. And again, what I was saying earlier, he's flawed, and his flaws make me like him more. He's just an utterly fantastic character. I love him so much. He has balls, he has guts, he has power, will. Elaborate on and on and on. He is just a badass character. He is a strong character, and just fantastic to read. Fantastic to read a character like Thomas. That's not something you get often. He's so good. Anyway, Thomas versus Bayon. Their whole sequence where Bayon is chasing him and Thomas is trying to escape out of Kez, isolated with very few soldiers. He only has like 10,000 soldiers. Meanwhile, Bayon has like, what, 40,000 something soldiers? Insane chances. Outnumbered 4-1, pretty much. Trying to escape a country he shouldn't even be in. Trying to get away. And the fights are very intense in and of themselves. The powder mages having to fight in and of themselves. The cavalry, the dragoons, the crusaders, all of that. All badass in and of itself. But you add on the whole aspect of this being in Thomas's perspective, and Thomas having to think as a commander throughout this whole sequence. He's thinking about like tactics. He's thinking about like how you respect like your fellow enemy in the military. And the two of them, like Bayon and Thomas, like both of them salute each other and respect each other. And Thomas takes Bayon as a prisoner of war afterward, and we see how that interaction plays out. And I think it brings such a strong perspective into the whole sequence on top of everything. But like, you really get invested in the fight, and you get invested in both sides in a way. Even though the Kez are the enemies and they're attacking Adro, and you're definitely cheering for Adro, you can definitely, in a way, feel for the Kez soldiers who are after Thomas through the whole sequence, because Thomas is looking at it as an old man who has faced too much war, and he's tired of it, even though it's what he does. It's just fantastic. So Thomas and Bayon's interactions and like how they worked against each other as characters, but then they were brought together after that, it's just fantastic. And that whole part of the book was fucking fantastic, because you have Adamat's like crescendo right as that crescendo is happening, and then there's a second crescendo right after that when they find out they're not done, even though they only have a few soldiers left who can fight. Insane non-stop sprint, and I read all of that back to back to back to back. I'll comment more about that later. Whew. Oh well, my next point was that Thomas has flaws that makes you love him. Yep, he has flaws, and it's interesting how like the time to bring out those flaws and world building and all those things comes up. Even in like the most like intense circumstances, there's still time to address those things while you're putting pressure on the reader. I don't know how else to elaborate on that. It's just fantastic and amazingly well done. A comment I had after that regarding Taniel. I mentioned that Taniel has a great balance as a son of a character. Like, his balance between like hating his father and disliking his father and fighting his father, but also his balance of like wishing the best for his father and like really owning his identity as Thomas's son, even if he doesn't always like it. He owns that identity and he like picks it up, particularly in book 2 when he thinks his father is dead, picks it up, and you see how it carries him as a person. And he is his own individual, but you can see how his interactions with his father and how his father's interactions with his son, like from both perspectives, because you follow both, you see how their perspectives influence each other, and it feels real. It feels like a father-son relationship from my perspective. So I really, really like how realistic that felt. It's not always. Oh man. Okay, the point after that is Nick's loss. Alright, we can go on and on here. Thomas doesn't get his revenge. After everything in these books, it's such a turnabout. It's such a turnabout. In the, like, towards the end of book 2, which is after this long sprint that I've mentioned, like, you sprint through crescendo number 1, crescendo number 2, which has a mini crescendo in it, go on, and you find out the fighting's not over. We have to go retake this city. We have to sneak into the city, retake this city, and finally let Thomas get his revenge. Thomas is chasing Nick's. He's after him, he's gonna do it, he's going, and then Nick's dies in an accident. His carriage crashes while Thomas is chasing him, and he dies from a broken neck, like some regular old plain thing. And Thomas is beyond angry. He is so upset. He is, insert all the words here. He couldn't even get his revenge. Like, after all of this, it's a plot twist in its own right, because you are waiting for him to get his revenge, and he doesn't get it, and you can see all this like anger and like frustration, and in those moments of his anger and frustration, you see when it hits him that he has a duty, he has something he needs to do, and he finds out that the whole city's about to go into the sky, and he stops it. Like, in all of his rage and like anger and everything, he is like, oh shit, I need to stop this from happening. And in that like blindness that he has, he just goes and does it. And when he next wakes up, the king of, is it Deliv? I don't know how to say any of the countries. The king is there and telling him that he pretty much saved his city along with some of his other powder mages. And really how that sequence was done, what I'm trying to get at here, how that sequence was done really shows like how Thomas kind of grew beyond the rage a bit, and he even like saved the people, and he cares about Adro, and now he's like more focused towards his country rather than his revenge. But he did, in a way, get his revenge, because Nixios did die, but he didn't get the satisfaction of torturing Nixios. What a shame. But also it's fantastic. And Thomas's, this is jumping ahead a bit, but Thomas's death in the last book is one of those few times where usually I would be really, really, really sad the character died, but Thomas died the way he should have died. Like, he earned his place, and I can't be upset that he died, because he had a fantastic journey. He made it to, like, pretty old, and he went out the way he said he would go out multiple times in the series. So, yeah, it's fantastic way to kill a lovable character. That was great. I love him. He's badass, like, all the way to the end. God, I love him so much. I really do. Alright, moving on. Going from Nixios to another bad guy, Veda. Oh, man. What I wrote here, this might not mean anything to people who have not read any Jim Butcher books, but what I wrote is that Veda is kind of like Marcus and Nicodemus. If you don't know Marcus and Nicodemus, in a way, they are hateable characters. They are bad guys. Well, I don't know. Marcus is one of my favorite characters. Alright, don't get me wrong. Marcus is one of my favorite characters. Nicodemus is one of my favorite characters in terms of how he's written. He's not a good person, but they are bad guys. They are terrible people in some capacity. One more than the other. But the general idea is they are bad people. But you grow attached to them as a reader either out of respect for how bad they are, or out of respect for how they talk, how they view the world, what they do. Veda is kind of like Marcus and Nicodemus in that he is a terrible guy, terrible person, but I can respect him as a bad guy and as a character. Like, he is a horrendous person, and we get that very clear. But the scenes where he's there, the way he talks, it kind of draws me in as a reader. It freaks me out. It freaks me out that in some other worlds, he would be a character I'd be intrigued in, until you realize how bad he is, and then you're not so intrigued in him. But he pulls you along in his own way, and it's freaky watching him work, it's freaky watching him talk, it's freaky watching all the things he does, how he tortures people, like how he's a terrible person, and you're still so fascinated in what he can do, how he can do it. He's just one of those bad guys, man. So, rereading book 2, which has the whole Veda sequence all over in it, that was my observation. He's a bad guy that I wanted to see and watch more. Particularly when he was fighting Fel. That was some insane shit. Ooh boy. But yeah. Freaky, terrifying. I didn't actually want him to be out and about, but I also wanted him to be out and about so I could see him more. But I also didn't want him to actually cause terror on the characters. Such a weird balance. But one of those fascinating characters. Alright. One of the things I wanted to comment on, and I didn't say this in the non-spoilers just because I think I'm probably going to rant about it, but there is a lot of cost in this series. There are character deaths, there are like losing limbs and stuff like that. It's highlighted losing people, losing friends, abuse, torture, guilt, depression, drugs, and other things that you do to deal with all this cost. It is here, and I told you, like, Thomas dies at the end, but it's, you can feel the cost, you can feel the death, you can feel the wear of the war in a way, but it's not grimdark, it's not overdone, is where I'm going at here. I haven't read True Grimdark yet, we'll get there eventually, but while there is gore, and there is removing limbs, and there's, like, blackmail, and, like, Adamant having his son turned into a monster, and after his finger was cut off and sent to him, like, it is dark, but it's dark in a way that it doesn't come across as grimdark. It's not, when I say it's gory, it's not like horrendously gory. It's just when there's some things where you are summoning the gory imagery. It's not the author like going in like long descriptions about like the blood and like arms being like what stuff looks like. He tells you what happens. He tells you that there's a finger in a box. He tells you that someone's arm gets ripped off. But he doesn't go into detail about, like, blood and gore and, like, how disgusting it really is. He's explaining the scenario, and that's why I think it doesn't come across as grimdark. But the cost brings attention to, like, you think the characters can die because you see all these people dying along the way, and you really can believe that something can go wrong for these people. And I mean, yeah. Because of the cost in the series, like, you can feel the risk as a reader. You feel that people can actually die, and it makes you more invested in the characters. And it's fantastic. It's so good. Okay, anyway. Whew. Oh, okay, I wanted to highlight one little tiny detail, but I love it so much, because character building, character development through the series. Thomas prays for Mahali. Thomas prays for Mahali. Like, in the middle of the book, he's like, please, Mahali, if you're out there, if you can hear me. And he's like, it's the closest he's ever had to a prayer. It's such a good line. And then when you see the prayer, like, took effect, like, a few chapters later, it's really investing in so many ways. It's so good. I just want to have a comment right here about Rip Mahali. He's a fantastic, fascinating god. I love him, and it's a shame that his brother decided to say nope to the world. He was a great guy. Rest in peace. Alright. Next one. There's a specific line I have remembered since last year when I finished reading the series, and that was slicing the front of the house off like a cake. That line is said when Bo is just, like, marching down the street, and then he stops in front of Vadis' house, and he just goes like this, and he goes, whoosh, and the whole front of the house just collapses into dust. It is gone. It is... And that was the first moment where I was like, I am now fully invested in Privilege. I am all about this shit. I am all about Bo. I am here. I am following him. It was that moment where I was like, I am into this. The Privilege, the Predate, I wasn't that invested in the first book. But when Bo did that, I was all in. He was insane. I instantly was attached to him, even if he's a terrible guy. Loved him. Fantastic character. And that line will stick with me for a very long time, because I love that line. And it's part of that big sequence that is like the big rush. So I'm never gonna let go of that. I already mentioned Phil versus Vadis, now I can't say it again, but the reveals were like, they talk in the same pattern, and Adamat was like, ding! It's like, oh shit. Because it really reveals more. Oh, so intense, so intense. After that, I just wrote Bull, Ola, Mahali, everyone. Because I just want to mention, I love everyone. Like, I ended up loving Rickard. Like, Rickard really grows on me in the third book. Like, a lot. And he starts to grow on you in the second book, I would say. At least for me. But he grows on me. Pretty much everyone grows on me at some point. It's insane. Like, even the eunuch. Like, in how many scenes do we see him? Like, not that many scenes. He still grows on me. Like, we have so many fascinating characters that I was so invested in learning about them, and with all the world building and everything, like, really getting attached to them. Finding out that Vadis is, like, trying to date, like, Lady Winslav, it's like, oh shit. And it also made me more interested in Lady Winslav. Like, there's so many levels to these characters, and including their flaws, that makes me just, they're so good, and I love them so much, and I love being able to see them again. I'm gonna keep seeing them. I like that in the first, like, the first 4 lines of meeting the king of Deliv, first 4 lines of him, already loved him. Like, there's just something about the characters that they grow on me so fast. So fast, it's insane. Oh, humor! That was the next line I wrote. Humor. The humor is in great spots, and it really hits. Sometimes it's not, the goal isn't to make you laugh sometimes. The goal isn't always to, like, give you some relief. There'll be humor in, like, dark moments. There'll be humor, like, in the middle of a chase. It's humor that makes the characters more human. It makes them more realistic. It makes them people you can invest in. And it's just fantastic how it's done. And I love the humor. And also the happy-go-lucky people, like Rickard and Bo, like, they're happy-go-lucky in the most weird way. They bring their, like, own level of humor, and again, it, like, brings them out as people and characters. I wrote Mahaly and Thomas, dang shame. Yep. Both honorable deaths, supposedly. Mahaly being killed by another god, rest in peace. Thomas. I love him. I love him so much. God. Urgh. Okay, and the last comment I wrote, which, again, there's so many other things I could comment on, but the last comment I did write here is cliffhangers. And this is my singular half criticism, alright? Cliffhangers are great, and there are great cliffhangers. My singular half criticism about this series, which I'm putting in the spoiler section because I need to give an example. Time skips. Like, keeping track of the time, particularly in book 1 and between books 2 and 3, is wild. And I feel like the time skip between books 2 and 3 is a lot to take in. So, that's my one thing. There are some things where the time skips make things, like, very dramatic and, like, very fast. There's times where the time skip, you realize that there's people traveling between these different places pretty fast. And it's hard to, like, really gauge, like, what would have happened in that time period they were traveling. It's hard to understand, like, how realistic something is because of how the time is passing. That is a thing. And the cliffhanger between book 2 and 3 and book 1 and 2 with Taniel specifically, like, Taniel has a big cliffhanger between both of the two books, but between both of the transitions between the books. And his cliffhangers are probably the biggest thing that I'm like, really? Like, come on, give me more. But aside from that, I'm still overall pretty satisfied. And the cliffhangers can be pretty strong. And there's definitely a balance in the cliffhangers between we have succeeded and we have lost. There's no, like, happy ending. There's a we have gained and we have lost ending. And that is fascinating in its own right. Alright, I think that's it. I think that's all I got. The Hound sequence, I said I liked the Hound sequence a lot the first time. Second time reading it, I was feeling iffy about it until, like, halfway through, and then I was like, yeah, I like this. So I had to think about that one. But I adore this series with my soul, through and through, and I now can reread it as often as I want, as long as I own the books, which I'm going back to my apartment this week, and I won't be bringing these with me, and that is a damn shame. But I love this series so much. It's so good. It's so good. I love it so much. I love it so much. And yeah. Alright. Addendum time. Post spoilers. Spoilers are over. But addendum time. After I finish my reading this series for the first time, I did give in and read the first of the short stories, which is called Forsworn. It's a Powder Mage novella by Brian McCullum, obviously. I gave in and I read this because I missed Thomas so much, and I couldn't not read this because this is about how he met his wife. It's like prequel lore, and oh man, it's so exciting. I kind of wish there was more because they cliffhanger it right at the end when he, like, meets her, and I want to know all about that, but it's still very satisfying. It gives you so much, like, prequel lore. It's in a perspective of someone you never met in the main series, but I felt like I was in it all over again. It's really short, too. It's like 65 pages. It's so short. But, man, it's a great novella. So, definitely recommend. And I will be reading the rest of the novellas eventually when I can get them on my Kindle. But fantastic novella. So, after the series, there's little novellas for you to read, and there's a sequel trilogy that I will get to eventually. Not yet. I'm waiting for now that I've reread the series, I have, like, a break, and then eventually my, like, hunger for the series will come back, and then I'll read the sequel series. Eventually. I have to hype myself up for lore, okay? Meh. Alright. With all of that said, what's new and what's next? Alright. Other than the possibility of novellas. The book I am next reading, other than The Autumn Republic, or continuing reading, I should say, is Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. I am starting this book again this week, finally. I know it's been months now. It has been months now. It has been like over 4 months now. 3 months. 4 months? Oh god. Oh no. I'm so sorry. I'm continuing this book and we will finish The Expanse. I promise you this. Now, I will warn, I was not able to find the next few books of The Expanse at any of the stores I went to. So, we're going to have an issue soon where I'm going to have to rent for a library, and that's going to make my finishing the series take even longer. I'm sorry about that. But I will try to get my hands on some copies, might order from Amazon if I need to. Get my hands on the copies of the next book and continue this series. I'm halfway through this book. I'm going to reread part of the front and then continue. Alright, and that's the only book I have ongoing. So then the last thing we talk about is new books I bought, which the holidays just happened, so I have a lot of new books. We'll talk about the important one last, I think. I think that would be favorable. Alright, starting with the first 2 books I bought over break. I found a used bookstore. Finally, there is now a used bookstore in this city. I don't know when it like came around, but there is now a used bookstore. So parents and I went to a used bookstore, and I got 2 books. All right, I got the first book of the Alex Verus series by Benedict Jacka. It's called Faded. It's kind of small. It's kind of like the first Rivers of London book, Midnight Riot. I just bought the single book to see if I like it. So that's the kind of vibe I'm going for there. All right, I got 1,000 Names by this author at the bottom here that I'm not going to try to pronounce. My friend highly, highly, highly recommended this book, and when I was buying the book, the owner of the store was telling me that he highly, highly, highly recommends this book. So, kind of funny, and I now own this book. This is also military fantasy, like Powder Mage, so kind of fitting. Alright, we're almost done. Alright, and then the other day, my family and I went to Barnes & Noble. I don't exactly know why, but we did. And they didn't have any of the books I was going to buy because they didn't have the next books of The Expanse or anything else I wanted. So we got to play the game of find 2 random books on the bookshelf and see if I like them. Random book number 1 is Spear by Nicola Griffith. Don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about either of these 2 books, pretty much. Apparently, according to Google, they're both LGBT books, which is a complete coincidence. That was not intentional. But according to Google, they both are. I don't know how much they are, but according to Google. Spear. Very small book. It looks like a quick read, which is part of why I grabbed it. And then the other book I got is A Master of Jinn. This is a book I saw during the Goodreads, like, voting for the Best Book Awards, like, a few years ago, and I liked the cover of it. So it stuck in my head. And I was like, you know what, I'll just grab that book, because I remember the cover, I remember being intrigued in it, and I remember hearing somebody say something good about it. I don't remember who, but somebody said something good about it. So, found it, got it. So, we might be reading this year. Maybe. Maybe not. But we might read this year, like, in between 2 big series. It is it's bigger than Spear. But it's not, like, terribly huge. So yeah, we may be reading this. Alright, and then there's only one other new book? Yeah, there's only one other new book. A very exciting new book. If you do not want spoilers for The Year of Sanderson, now is the time to leave, because this is the last thing in the video. But I got my first book of my 4 books I purchased for way too much money. And it is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. It's the first of these surprise books. The physical copy will be here in a few months, apparently. Some things have happened. It's been delayed. But in the meantime, they gave me my Kindle copy because I rightfully paid for it. So I am now the proud owner of Tress of the Emerald Sea, and I'm pretty sure I can't read it yet, but I won't be able to know until my friends get to it. So we have to wait. And I need to read Stormlight Archive. And the intention is to read Stormlight Archive this year. The intention. I don't know if I will, but that's the hope, is I'll read Stormlight Archive this year and get to these Sanderson novels. But I officially own it. It's a beautiful cover. I really like it. It's very intriguing. And yeah, that's all I have for this video. I now have to edit this because I ran out of space twice. I'll see you all next time, and I'll be back when I finish the next book of The Expanse. Bye-bye.